What would you do if you discovered that your own family had been stealing from you for 15 years? That while you were struggling to pay rent, working 3 jobs just to survive, your relatives were living in mansions bought with your money? Today, I'm going to tell you about Diana, a 47-year-old single mother from Phoenix who spent 15 years believing she was poor until a chance encounter at a gas station led her to uncover a $40 million secret that her family had been hiding since she was 32. But here's the thing that will blow your mind. What Diana did in the next 48 hours didn't just get her money back. It exposed a conspiracy so elaborate, so cruel, that it involved forged documents, fake death certificates, and family members she trusted with her life. If you've ever been betrayed by people you love, if you've ever wondered why some people seem to have all the luck while you struggle, or if you've ever dreamed of the moment when justice finally catches up with the people who wronged you, Diana's story will give you chills. Trust me, you'll never see the ending coming. And what she did to get revenge? Pure genius. Let me paint you a picture of Diana's life before that fateful day at the gas station. For 15 years, Diana Rodriguez had been the definition of the working poor in America. She lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in one of Phoenix's rougher neighborhoods, where the air conditioning barely worked and the rent ate up half her income. Diana was a single mother to her teenage daughter, Emma, 16, who was brilliant, straight A's, dreams of becoming a doctor. But Diana could barely afford to keep her in regular clothes, let alone save for college. Diana worked 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Monday through Friday, she was a medical assistant at a busy clinic downtown, making $15 an hour. Weekends, she cleaned houses for wealthy families in Scottsdale, scrubbing toilets and mopping floors for people who spent more on a single dinner than Diana made in a week. And 3 nights a week, she drove for a rideshare service, picking up drunk college students and exhausted hospital workers. 18-hour days were normal for Diana. She'd leave for her first job at 6 a.m. and often wouldn't get home until midnight. Emma, bless her heart, had learned to be incredibly independent. She cooked dinner for herself, did her own laundry, and never complained when Diana missed school events because she was working. But here's what you need to understand about Diana. She wasn't bitter about her situation. She believed in hard work, believed that if she just kept pushing, kept grinding, eventually things would get better. She had dreams, big dreams. She wanted to open her own medical practice someday, wanted to give Emma everything she deserved. What Diana didn't know was that she should have been living those dreams already. Let me tell you about Diana's family, or what she thought she knew about them. Diana's grandmother, Elena Rodriguez, had died when Diana was 32 years old. Elena had been the matriarch of their large Mexican-American family, a woman who had immigrated to the United States with nothing and built what everyone believed was a small but successful life. Elena owned a modest house in an older part of Phoenix and had always been generous with her grandchildren, slipping them $20 bills when their parents weren't looking, making sure everyone had enough to eat during family gatherings. When Elena died, Diana's uncle Carlos, Elena's oldest son and the family's self-appointed leader, had handled all the funeral arrangements and the estate. Carlos was a successful businessman, or so everyone thought. He owned several restaurants in the Phoenix area and always drove nice cars and wore expensive suits. Carlos had gathered the family together after the funeral and explained that Elena, unfortunately, hadn't left much behind. The house would need to be sold to pay off her debts, and there wasn't really an inheritance to speak of. Maybe a few $1,000s split between all the grandchildren, but nothing life-changing. Diana had been disappointed, but not surprised. Elena had lived simply, and Diana had never expected to inherit anything substantial. She'd loved her grandmother for who she was, not what she might leave behind. What Diana didn't know was that Carlos was lying. Elena hadn't been a simple immigrant who lived modestly. Elena Rodriguez had been a secret real estate genius. For 40 years, Elena had been quietly buying property throughout Phoenix and the surrounding areas. Not flashy properties, She preferred small apartment buildings in up-and-coming neighborhoods, vacant lots that she suspected would become valuable, and commercial properties in areas she believed would develop. Elena had an incredible eye for investment. She would buy properties when they were cheap, hold on to them for years, and sell them at exactly the right moment. She reinvested every profit, slowly building an empire that nobody in the family knew existed. But Elena hadn't been secretive about her wealth because she was ashamed of it. She'd been secretive because she was smart. She'd grown up poor, had seen what money could do to families, had watched wealth tear apart relationships and turn siblings into enemies. Elena had kept her fortune hidden because she wanted to make sure it went to the right people, family members who would use it wisely, who wouldn't let it corrupt them, who would honor her memory by doing good with what she'd built. And Elena had chosen Diana. Not Carlos, who had always been arrogant and money-hungry, not Diana's cousins, who had never shown much ambition or responsibility. Diana, the granddaughter who worked 3 jobs and never complained, who was raising her daughter with dignity and strength, who had Elena's same work ethic and moral compass. Elena had written a very specific will detailing exactly how her fortune, worth approximately $40 million in real estate, investments, and business interests, should be distributed. The bulk of it, about $35 million, was to go to Diana. The remaining $5 million was to be split between other family members, with the largest portion going to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged students. But Carlos had intercepted the will. For 15 years, Carlos had been living off Diana's inheritance, telling the family that Elena's estate was still in probate or tied up in legal issues. He'd used Elena's money to expand his restaurant business, to buy a mansion in Scottsdale, to send his own children to private schools and expensive colleges. Carlos's wife, Maria, knew about the deception. So did his oldest son, Roberto, who'd been helping to manage the stolen properties for the past 5 years. They'd created an elaborate system of shell companies and false documents to hide the fact that they were essentially stealing from their own family. And Diana? Diana had no idea. For 15 years, she'd been working herself to the bone while her uncle and his family lived in luxury bought with money that rightfully belonged to her. But secrets have a way of coming to light, don't they? And sometimes the truth reveals itself in the most unexpected places. Like a gas station on a Tuesday morning in October 2024.
October 8th, 2024. Diana remembers the exact date because it was the day her entire world turned upside down. Diana was running late for her shift at the medical clinic. Emma had been sick the night before. Just a stomach bug, but Diana had stayed up most of the night making sure she was okay. Now, Diana was exhausted, running on 3 hours of sleep and desperately needing coffee. She pulled into a Circle K gas station on her usual route to work. It was one of those generic stops she'd made hundreds of times. Grab coffee, maybe a protein bar if she had enough cash, and get back on the road. Diana was standing in line behind a man in an expensive suit who was buying a lottery ticket and complaining loudly into his phone about some business deal. She wasn't really paying attention until she heard him say a name that made her blood freeze. No. The Elena Rodriguez properties are untouchable. We've been over this. Those assets are still generating passive income, and we can't liquidate them without raising questions. Elena Rodriguez, Diana's grandmother's name. Diana's heart started racing. It had to be a coincidence, right? Elena Rodriguez wasn't exactly an uncommon name in Phoenix, but something about the way the man was talking, the casual mention of properties and assets, made Diana's stomach drop. She found herself following the man out of the gas station, staying far enough behind that he wouldn't notice her, but close enough to hear his conversation. "Look, Roberto, Your father and I have been managing this situation for 15 years. We're not going to blow it now because you want to buy a new car. The family still thinks the estate was worthless. Let's keep it that way." Roberto. Diana knew a Roberto. Her cousin Roberto, Uncle Carlos's son. Diana watched as the man got into a silver Mercedes, the kind of car that cost more than Diana made in 2 years. As he drove away, she quickly snapped a photo of his license plate with her phone. Diana was 45 minutes late to work that day, but she didn't care. She spent her lunch break doing something she'd never done before, digging into public records online. Phoenix property records are public information. Anyone can search them if they know where to look. Diana had never had a reason to look before, but now she was a woman possessed. She started by searching for her grandmother's name, Elena Rodriguez. What she found made her physically sick. Page after page of property records, Elena Rodriguez had owned 14 apartment buildings, 6 commercial properties, 3 vacant lots that had since been developed into shopping centers, and a 50-acre plot of land that was now home to a luxury housing development. The estimated current value of these properties, just over $40 million. But here's what made Diana's hand shake as she stared at her phone screen. According to the records, Elena Rodriguez hadn't died in 2009. According to the official documents, Elena Rodriguez had died in 2017, 8 years later than Diana had been told.
Someone had been filing paperwork in Elena's name for 8 years after her supposed death. Someone had been managing her properties, collecting rent, making investments, all while the family believed Elena was dead and her estate was worthless. Diana screenshotted every single document she could find: property transfers, tax records, business filings, and one name kept appearing over and over again as the estate manager and trustee: Carlos E. Rodriguez, her uncle Carlos. That evening, Diana did something she'd never done before. She hired a private investigator. It cost her $500, money she couldn't afford to spend, but she had to know the truth. The private investigator, a former police detective named Mike Chen, called Diana back within 48 hours. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Mike said, his voice gentle but serious, "I need you to sit down for this conversation." Mike had uncovered a conspiracy that was so elaborate, so carefully planned, that it had taken him 2 full days to piece it all together. Elena Rodriguez had indeed died in 2009, just as Diana remembered. But Carlos had never filed the proper death certificate. Instead, he'd created false documents showing that Elena was still alive but incapacitated, requiring him to manage her affairs as her caretaker. For 8 years, Carlos had been signing documents in Elena's name, paying her taxes and managing her properties. In 2017, when it became too difficult to maintain the fiction that Elena was still alive, Carlos had finally filed a death certificate, but not before ensuring that all of Elena's assets had been legally transferred to shell companies that he controlled. The real will, Elena's actual will, the one that left $35 million to Diana, had never been filed with the probate court. Mike had found a copy of it hidden in records at Elena's lawyer's office. The lawyer had died in 2015, and his files had been stored in a warehouse until his firm was dissolved. Elena's real will was crystal clear. Diana was to inherit the bulk of the estate with specific instructions that the money should be used to ensure Diana never has to struggle again and to give my great-granddaughter Emma every opportunity I never had. Elena knew exactly what Diana's life was like. She'd known about the 3 jobs, the financial stress, the dreams Diana had put on hold, and she'd wanted to change all of that. But Carlos had stolen not just money from Diana, he'd stolen 15 years of financial security, 15 years of being able to spend time with her daughter instead of working constantly, 15 years of opportunities and dreams and peace of mind. Mike handed Diana a thick folder of documents, copies of everything he'd found, legal proof of the conspiracy, evidence that would hold up in court. What you do with this information is up to you, but I want you to know that what was done to you wasn't just morally wrong, it was criminal. Your uncle and his family didn't just hide your inheritance, they committed fraud, forgery, and theft on a massive scale. Diana sat in her car outside Mike's office for an hour, staring at the folder in her lap. 15 years of struggle. 15 years of exhaustion, 15 years of telling Emma they couldn't afford things that other kids took for granted. All of it unnecessary. All of it based on a lie. That night, Diana made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't just going to get her money back. She was going to make sure Carlos and his family faced the consequences of what they'd done. Diana was done being the poor relative. It was time to take back what was rightfully hers.
What Diana did next wasn't just smart. It was calculated, strategic, and absolutely devastating to the people who had betrayed her. Diana didn't rush into confrontation. She didn't call Carlos screaming and demanding her money. She didn't post angry messages on Facebook or try to rally other family members to her side. Instead, Diana did something much more powerful. She got herself a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Diana used $2,000 of her emergency fund, money she'd been saving for Emma's senior year expenses, to hire Patricia Williams, one of Phoenix's most ruthless estate attorneys. Patricia specialized in cases involving family fraud and had a reputation for being absolutely relentless when it came to recovering stolen assets. Patricia reviewed all of Mike's evidence and additional documents that Diana had gathered. After 3 days of investigation, Patricia called Diana with news that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Diana, what was done to you is one of the most elaborate cases of inheritance fraud I've seen in 20 years of practice. But here's the good news. We have them dead to rights. The paper trail is so clear that this case won't even go to trial. They'll settle rather than face criminal prosecution." But Patricia had an even better strategy in mind. "Here's what we're going to do," Patricia explained. "We're going to give Carlos and his family exactly 48 hours to return every penny they've stolen, plus interest and damages. If they comply, we'll pursue this as a civil matter only. If they don't, I'm filing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and grand theft. And I'm recommending that the district attorney prosecute to the fullest extent of the law." Diana felt a power she'd never experienced before. For 15 years, she'd been at the mercy of circumstances beyond her control. Now, for the first time in her adult life, she held all the cards. The confrontation happened on a Friday morning at 10 a.m. Patricia had arranged for Diana, Carlos, and his lawyer to meet at Patricia's law office in downtown Phoenix. Diana had taken the day off work, the first personal day she'd taken in 3 years. She'd also done something she'd never done before. She'd gone shopping for a power outfit. She used money from her inheritance research fund to buy a sharp black suit and professional heels. If she was going to confront the man who'd stolen her life, she was going to look like the successful woman she should have been all along. Carlos walked into that conference room expecting to handle a family misunderstanding. He'd probably assumed Diana had found out about some small discrepancy and wanted to discuss it. He certainly wasn't expecting to find Diana sitting next to one of the city's most feared attorneys, with boxes of evidence spread across the conference table.
The look on Carlos's face when Patricia began reading from Elena's real will was something Diana will never forget. Carlos went from confident to confused to terrified in the span of about 30 seconds. "Mr. Rodriguez," Patricia said in a voice that could cut steel, "my client has irrefutable evidence that you have been fraudulently managing assets that legally belong to her for the past 15 years. We have copies of forged documents bearing your signature, false death certificates that you filed, and financial records showing that you have personally profited to the tune of approximately $8 million from assets that were never legally yours." Carlos's lawyer, a nervous young man who clearly hadn't been briefed on the scope of the situation, kept shuffling through papers and asking for clarification. But Diana wasn't interested in watching Carlos squirm. She was interested in justice. "Uncle Carlos," Diana said, her voice steady and calm, "I want you to look at me, really look at me." Carlos reluctantly met her eyes. "For 15 years, I worked 3 jobs because I thought we were poor. I drove a car with 200,000 miles on it because I couldn't afford a new one. I told my daughter we couldn't afford things that your children took for granted. I missed Emma's school plays and parent-teacher conferences because I was working to pay rent on an apartment that I should never have had to live in." Diana's voice didn't waver, didn't break. She'd practiced this speech in her head for days. "You didn't just steal money from me, Carlos. You stole time. You stole experiences. You stole my daughter's childhood and my peace of mind. You let me believe I was a failure when I should have been living the life my grandmother intended for me." Carlos finally spoke, and his words were exactly what Diana expected: excuses, justifications, and lies. "Diana, you don't understand. The estate was complicated. I was protecting the family's interests. I was going to tell everyone eventually, but the timing never seemed right." Patricia cut him off. "Mr. Rodriguez, let me make this very simple. You have 48 hours to return $35 million in assets to my client, plus $5 million in damages for lost investment income and emotional distress. You will also transfer all remaining properties back to Ms. Rodriguez immediately, and you will pay all legal fees associated with this case." "And if I refuse?" Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. "Then I file criminal charges on Monday morning: grand theft, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Those charges carry a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Your wife and son will face similar charges as co-conspirators. All of your assets will be frozen while the case is prosecuted, which means your restaurants, your house, your cars, your children's college funds, everything will be tied up in court for years. But more importantly," Patricia continued, "I'll make sure this story gets picked up by every local news station in Phoenix. Successful businessman steals $40 million from family is exactly the kind of story that makes headlines. Your reputation, your business, your standing in the community, all of it will be destroyed permanently." Carlos left that meeting a broken man. His lawyer advised him to comply with every demand Patricia had made. But Diana wasn't done yet. She had one more surprise in store for her uncle and his family. That evening, Diana did something that still gives her chills when she thinks about it. She called a family meeting. What happened at that family meeting was the most satisfying moment of Diana's life, but it wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, truth, and making sure something like this could never happen again. Diana had invited every member of the extended Rodriguez family to her apartment for Sunday dinner. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. She told them she had important family news to share and that she was cooking Elena's famous tamales recipe. Now, you have to understand, Diana's apartment was tiny. She'd never hosted a family gathering before because she'd always been embarrassed about her living situation. But this time was different. This time, Diana wanted everyone to see exactly how she'd been living while Carlos's family enjoyed luxury bought with her money. 18 family members crowded into Diana's small living room that Sunday evening. Carlos and his family were notably tense. They knew what was coming, but everyone else was just happy to see Diana finally competent enough to host a family event. Diana served dinner first, keeping the conversation light and pleasant. She asked about everyone's lives, complimented her cousins on their new cars and recent vacations, admired photos of expensive family trips to Europe and Hawaii. Then, as everyone was finishing their meals, Diana stood up and cleared her throat. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," Diana began. "As you all know, I've been struggling financially for many years. I've always wondered why some of us seem to have such different luck in life. Why some of us could afford nice things while others worked multiple jobs just to get by." She paused, looking around the room at faces that were beginning to show confusion and concern. "Well, I recently discovered the answer to that question." Diana then did something that was both devastating and beautiful. She pulled out a large poster board, the kind used for school science projects, that she'd prepared earlier that day. On one side of the poster, she'd created a timeline of her life for the past 15 years. Working 3 jobs, Emma wearing secondhand clothes, Diana's car breaking down repeatedly, the family's small Christmas gifts because Diana couldn't afford more, medical bills that Diana couldn't pay when Emma was sick. On the other side of the poster, she'd created a timeline of Carlos's family's life. New house in Scottsdale, European vacations, Carlos's son's private school graduation, Maria's jewelry and designer clothes, the expensive cars, the restaurant expansions, the country club memberships. "I wondered for years how Uncle Carlos could afford such a beautiful life while Grandma Elena's other descendants struggled," Diana said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "It turns out there's a simple explanation." Diana then did something that was both devastating and beautiful. She pulled out a large poster board, the kind used for school science projects, that she prepared earlier that day. On one side of the poster, she created a timeline of her life for the past 15 years. Working 3 jobs, Emma wearing secondhand clothes, Diana's car breaking down repeatedly, the family's small Christmas gifts because Diana couldn't afford more, medical bills that Diana couldn't pay when Emma was sick. On the other side of the poster, she created a timeline of Carlos's family's life. New house in Scottsdale, European vacations, Carlos's son's private school graduation, Maria's jewelry and designer clothes, the expensive cars, the restaurant expansions, the country club memberships. "I wondered for years how Uncle Carlos could afford such a beautiful life while Grandma Elena's other descendants struggled," Diana said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "It turns out there's a simple explanation." Diana then did something that was both devastating and beautiful. She pulled out copies of Elena's real will and began reading it aloud. The room erupted. Shocked gasps, angry voices, people demanding explanations. But Diana wasn't finished. "Uncle Carlos has been living off my inheritance for 15 years, Diana announced. "Every vacation his family took, every luxury they enjoyed, every opportunity they gave their children, it was all paid for with money that Grandma Elena intended for Emma and me." Carlos tried to interrupt, tried to offer more excuses, but Diana's cousin Maria, not Carlos's wife, but their Aunt Maria, shut him down immediately. "Carlos Rodriguez," Aunt Maria said, standing up and pointing her finger at him, "are you telling me that while Diana worked herself to death and Emma wore clothes from thrift stores, you were spending Diana's inheritance money?" The family turned on Carlos with a fury that Diana had never seen before. These weren't just disappointed relatives. These were people who had watched Diana struggle for years, who had sometimes helped with Emma's school expenses or brought groceries when times were especially tough, who had always wondered why Diana's life was so hard when she worked so much. But Diana's biggest surprise was still coming. "There's one more thing I need to tell everyone," Diana said, raising her voice over the family arguments. "As of Friday afternoon, Uncle Carlos has agreed to return everything he stole, all of it, plus damages." The room went silent again. "Starting Monday morning, I'll be taking legal ownership of all the properties and assets that rightfully belong to me. But I want everyone to know what I'm planning to do with this money." Diana's voice became stronger, more confident than anyone had ever heard it. "First, Emma will have her college education fully paid for, and she'll attend any medical school she chooses without student loans. Second, I'm establishing the Elena Rodriguez Family Scholarship Fund, which will help other family members pay for education and emergency expenses. But most importantly, I'm starting a nonprofit organization that helps families recover from financial fraud, because what happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone." The family meeting ended with Carlos and his immediate family leaving in shame and anger, while everyone else stayed to hug Diana, cry with her, and celebrate the justice that was finally being served. But Diana's story doesn't end with getting her money back. What she did with her newfound wealth was even more incredible than how she recovered it. Within 6 months, Diana had quit all 3 of her jobs and enrolled in a business management program at Arizona State University. Remember, she'd always dreamed of running her own medical practice? Now she finally had the resources to make that dream a reality.
Emma, meanwhile, was accepted to Stanford University with plans to study pre-med. For the first time in her life, Emma could focus entirely on her education without worrying about the financial burden she might be placing on her mother. Diana bought a beautiful house in Scottsdale, ironically, just 3 streets away from the house Carlos was forced to sell to pay his legal fees and penalties. But Diana didn't choose that location out of spite. She chose it because it was in the best school district in the area, and she wanted to be close to the community health center where she planned to eventually open her practice. The Elena Rodriguez Family Scholarship Fund helped 12 family members pursue higher education in its first year. Diana's cousin Miguel, who had always wanted to be a teacher but couldn't afford the education program, graduated with his teaching degree debt-free. Her niece Sophia, a talented artist, was able to attend art school without taking out loans. But perhaps the most satisfying part of Diana's transformation was her nonprofit organization, Justice for Families. Within 2 years, Diana's organization had helped over 200 families recover assets stolen through inheritance fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. Diana became a fierce advocate for families who had been betrayed by people they trusted. She spoke at conferences, testified before state legislatures about inheritance law reform, and became an expert witness in other fraud cases. As for Carlos, he served 18 months in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. His restaurants failed while he was incarcerated, and his family was forced to sell their house and most of their possessions to pay legal fees and restitution. But here's the thing that shows you exactly what kind of person Diana is. When Carlos was released from prison, Diana hired him to work as a property manager for one of her apartment buildings. Not because she forgave him, she'll never forgive the 15 years he stole from her, but because she believes in second chances, and because she knew he needed work to support his family. Carlos worked for Diana now, managing the same properties he once stole from her. Every month, when he submits his reports to Diana's business manager, he's reminded of what he lost through his greed and deception. It's not exactly revenge, it's something better,
It's justice with compassion. Today, Diana Rodriguez is 49 years old and living the life her grandmother Elena always intended for her to have. She runs 3 successful businesses: a medical consulting firm, a property management company overseeing 12 apartment buildings, and Justice for Families, her nonprofit organization. She's also in her final year of her MBA program, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while running multiple businesses, because Diana has never been afraid of hard work. Emma just finished her first year at Stanford, where she's thriving in the pre-med program. She calls her mom every Sunday to tell her about her classes, her research opportunities, and her plans to specialize in family medicine so she can work alongside Diana at the community health center they're planning to open together. But you know what's the most beautiful part of Diana's transformation? She didn't let the betrayal make her bitter or suspicious of everyone around her. If anything, it made her more generous, more determined to help others, more committed to using her resources to make a positive difference. Diana still lives modestly by choice. Yes, she bought a nice house, and yes, she drives a reliable car and wears professional clothes. But she's not interested in the kind of flashy lifestyle that Carlos pursued. She's more interested in security, education, and giving back. Every month, Diana gets financial reports showing the income from her various properties and investments. The number is staggering. Her $40 million inheritance has grown to nearly $55 million through smart management and appreciation. But Diana doesn't hoard that wealth. She reinvests most of it into her community through her scholarship fund, her nonprofit work, and a new project she's incredibly excited about. Diana is opening the Elena Rodriguez Community Health Center in one of Phoenix's most underserved neighborhoods. It will provide affordable medical care, financial counseling, and legal aid to families who can't afford these services elsewhere. The center will be staffed by healthcare providers, attorneys, and financial advisors who are committed to serving people who have been taken advantage of or who simply need a helping hand. My grandmother always said that money is only as good as what you do with it, Diana told me when I interviewed her for this story. Elena could have lived like a rich woman, but she chose to live modestly and invest in the future. I want to honor that by making sure other people don't have to struggle the way I did. Diana's relationship with her extended family has been completely transformed too. She's no longer the poor relative that everyone feels sorry for. She's become the family's success story, the person everyone comes to for advice, the one who hosts the big holiday gatherings and helps family members through tough times. But perhaps most importantly, Diana has become a role model for other women who find themselves in seemingly impossible situations. Through her nonprofit work and public speaking, Diana has shown thousands of women that it's never too late to fight for what's rightfully yours, that being betrayed doesn't mean being defeated, and that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the catalyst for the best thing that happens to you. The gas station where Diana overheard that life-changing phone conversation, she bought the property 6 months ago and turned it into a small business incubator, providing low-cost rental space for women entrepreneurs who need affordable places to start their businesses. There's a plaque by the front door that reads, "Sometimes life-changing moments happen in the most ordinary places." Elena Rodriguez Community Foundation. Diana still goes there sometimes, not for gas or coffee, but just to remind herself of how much her life has changed since that October morning when she was running late for work and desperately needed caffeine. I could have driven past that gas station 100 times and never heard Carlos's partner talking about my grandmother's properties, Diana reflects. But I think Grandma Elena was watching out for me that day. I think she made sure I was in the right place at the right time to finally learn the truth. As for Emma, she's planning to spend this summer working at Justice for Families, learning about the legal and business side of her mother's nonprofit work. Emma has decided that after medical school, she wants to specialize in forensic accounting as well as family medicine, so she can help other families who have been financially exploited. My mom showed me that you don't have to accept injustice just because it comes from people you're supposed to trust, Emma told me. She taught me that fighting for what's right isn't just about getting justice for yourself, it's about making sure the same thing doesn't happen to other people. Diana's story could have ended 15 years ago with a young single mother giving up on her dreams and accepting a life of struggle. Instead, it's a story about persistence, courage, and the incredible power of truth to eventually surface no matter how deeply it's been buried. But most of all, it's a story about what happens when a woman finally realizes her own worth and decides to fight for the life she deserves.
So why did I tell you Diana's incredible story today? Because maybe you needed to hear it. Maybe you're in your own situation where you suspect that something isn't right, where you feel like you're not getting what you deserve, where people who are supposed to care about you might be taking advantage of your trust. Or maybe you're like Diana was, working multiple jobs, struggling to make ends meet, wondering why life seems so much easier for everyone else. Maybe you've accepted that this is just how things are, that some people get lucky and others don't. Diana wants you to know this. If something feels wrong, trust your instincts. If you suspect you're being lied to or cheated, investigate. If you feel like you're not getting what you deserve, fight for it. You have more power than you think you do. Diana also wants you to know that it's never too late to change your life. She was 47 years old when she discovered the truth about her inheritance. 47 years old when she finally got the chance to live the life she'd always dreamed of. If you think you're too old, if you think you've missed your chance, if you think it's too late to start over, Diana's story proves you wrong. And most importantly, Diana wants you to remember that justice isn't just about getting what's owed to you. It's about using your victory to help other people who are still fighting their own battles. If Diana's story inspired you, if it gave you hope, if it reminded you that truth has a way of surfacing even after 15 years of lies, please give this video a like and subscribe for more incredible true stories of courage and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Diana's message today, whether they're dealing with family betrayal, financial struggle, or just need a reminder that they're stronger than they think they are. And remember, your story isn't over. The best chapters might still be ahead of you. Sometimes all it takes is being in the right place at the right time and having the courage to ask the right questions. Thank you for listening to Diana's story. I'll see you next time.